Today, we are looking at 5 running back targets in 2024 fantasy football. But before we dig in, make sure you head over to 4for4.com and use promo code YouTube for 25% off any plan. With an ever-increasing rate of running back by committee situations in the NFL, wide receivers have been continually pushed up fantasy draft boards. That, paired with a higher passer rating in general, has made it more viable to wait on your running backs. But what if you decide to really wait on your running backs? Like the 7th round, 8th round, 9th round, you can gobble up value at the wide receiver and onesie positions while piecing together a room of backs that might be overlooked by your lean mates.
And enough power by Moss to finish.
Zack Moss breaking free. Moss, midfield, still going, and finally brought down inside the 35-yard line.
Moss in the backfield along with Gilliam. It's Moss. Ooh! Boy, just a violent collision with Roberts, but the second effort gets Moss in.
Over the last 3 seasons, the Bengals have been one of the most pass-happy teams in the NFL. As a result, they have finished 20th, 29th, and 25th in fantasy points scored on the ground. That didn't seem to matter for Joe Mixon's fantasy stat lines, though, as most of those rushing points went to him, and they were paired with an average of 70 targets per year. In 2023, his usage added up to the overall RB5 finish and half PPR scoring. Mixon is now down in Houston, and the team brought in Zack Moss as their presumed RB1, yet is coming off draft boards in the RB28 range. All signs point towards Moss taking over the Mixon role with the Bengals, with only 5th round 2023 NFL draft selection Chase Brown in town to get in his way. Last season, with Mixon continually proving inefficient on the ground, Brown only accounted for 44 rush attempts while spending far more time on special teams than with the offense. He was only allotted double-digit opportunities in 3 games as a rookie, with his most extensive involvement coming in a Week 18 game in which Mixon sat the entirety of the 4th quarter in what was at the time a 31-0 lead. Moss averaged 20.9 touches for 94 yards in the 8 games last season in which he played at least half of the snaps with the Colts. Much of that production came on the ground, specifically out of shotgun formations, where he earned the 3rd most yards across the entire position. He now joins a Bengals team that had the 3rd highest rate of runs out of shotgun and the 3rd highest percentage of their rushing yards coming out of the formation. The Bengals offense in general should be far better than the league average product we saw in 2023. Joe Burrow is back to health, T. Higgins is back for at least 1 more season, and the team added 2 offensive tackles this offseason, veteran Trent Brown and 1st-round selection Amarius Mims. Even if Moss is somehow only a goal line back, that could be enough to pay off his RB3 price tag.
1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns. Jaylen Warren with a nice block by Deontay Johnson. Warren turning on his speed, trying to get away from the defense. Jared Boyer can't get him. Jordan Porter, 63 yards on the run by Jaylen Warren. What a play right there.
It feels like we've been dealing with the Steelers' split backfield for way longer than we have, but it has been 2 seasons of Najee Harris capped out by his teammate. A former undrafted free agent out of Oklahoma State, Jaylen Warren didn't seem like much of a threat to anybody heading into the summer of 2022. The Pittsburgh depth chart was littered with replacement-level backups, including Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland, but Warren ascended to the RB2 role by the team's Week 1 kickoff. Though the role was negligible for fantasy purposes, he finished the season top 10 among fellow rookie running backs in rushing yards, yards per carry, and receptions. His role in the offense would end up ramping up toward the end of the season, and that rolled over into his usage in 2023. Not only did he finish 3rd on the team with the 72 targets, he continued to eat into Najee's ground game. Harris handled 71% of the team's carries in 2022, but dropped to 63% last year, while Warren jumped from 20% to 37%. With Warren providing a far more efficient option over Harris, there isn't much reason to think that a 60-40 split is going to decrease, and there's a new OC in town who is well-versed in using 2 running backs extensively. Through Arthur Smith's 3 seasons in Atlanta, his leading running back garnered 44%, 46%, and 47.5% of the team's running back carries, with that final number being Bijan Robinson, who had just been selected with the 8th overall pick. Though I don't think the Steelers are going to let Arthur Smith come into town and phase Najee Harris out of the offense, I think there's a chance that the 2 running backs' opportunities could be even closer than they were last season. If it does end up being the case, Warren could outright score more fantasy points than his teammate, even with fewer touches. Among 63 qualifying running backs, Warren ranked 3rd in yards created after contact, 4th in yards per carry, 8th in yards per route run, and 1st in broken plus missed tackles recorded. He was sneakily one of the best backs in the league, and now the tandem gets a huge boost to the offensive line thanks to some huge additions through the NFL draft. Weighing the low-end outcomes with Warren's current 8th-round draft capital just makes me like him even more. He finished last season as Fantasy's RB 33.5 PPR points per game, while handling the aforementioned 37% rushing workload. Even if that doesn't increase, that's exactly where he's going in drafts. But what happens if he usurps Najee even further in an offense that could run through the backfield even more than last year?
And with the 46th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Carolina Panthers select Jonathon Brooks.
Jonathon Brooks, look, he steps right in and is their most talented runner. Chuba Hubbard's there, Miles Sanders there. When healthy, now Jonathon Brooks is coming off of an injury. I think he's a better player. Look at his ability to play through contact. Talk about contact balance. His is exceptional.
It's understandable that fantasy managers want immediate production from their running backs, particularly when we've never seen that running back take an NFL field. But the consensus ranking over at Fantasy Pros currently has the first running back taken in the NFL draft as the RB 38. Brooks was ultra productive in his 1 year as a starter after minimal playing time in his first 2 years at Texas, due entirely to sharing backfields with Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. When given his opportunity, Brooks peeled off 8 straight games with at least 98 yards on the ground between weeks 3 and 11. The feel-good breakout campaign was sadly cut short during his final 100-yard performance of the season as he tore his right ACL against TCU on November 11th. The injury puts his Week 1 availability into question as he was forced to miss rookie minicamp, but apparently expects to be back by training camp. His landing spot is admittedly a questionable one if we look at what the Panthers did in their first year with Bryce Young at the helm. They finished 31st in scoring offense and dead last in yardage, as the rookie quarterback struggled mightily with one of the league's worst supporting casts. On top of that, the offensive line finished near the bottom in most metrics, including 29th in adjusted line yards and 27th in running back yards before contact. The Panthers did what they could to identify these issues, including the additions of Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis in the middle of the line, along with the insertion of Deontay Johnson and first-round selection Xavier Legette to the wide receiver room. Technically, Brooks sits behind veteran options Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard on the depth chart, but it's hard to imagine that this will be an issue once the rookie is in pads. After all, the team traded up in the second round to grab him. Not only does this new regime have no ties to Hubbard, they also allowed Sanders to be completely phased out of the offense by the end of the season. He had 15 total carries in his final 4 appearances, finishing 2023 among the league's worst in both yards per carry and yards after contact. It's hard to believe Carolina will find a trade partner for the veteran, but the team has already eaten dead money on players this offseason, including Hayden Hurst, Von Bell, and Bradley Bozeman, so he could be moved by the time Week 1 rolls around. When Jonathon Brooks is on the field, he will undoubtedly operate as the team's RB1. Fantasy drafters should be patient and enjoy the stretch run production in both redraft and best ball leagues with a zero RB approach. If he really is ready for a full workload by opening weekend, we should just take that as an added bonus to his value.
Draft, the 2-time Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams select
Corum.
Yes! Les Snead, you are a genius. You are hitting the jackpot. You too, Sean McVay. You betcha. You have a winner coming to Los Angeles, and all I have to say is hello, neighbor. Right across the street, whatever you need from NFL Network, I got you covered. What a superb choice. And this
a pure arbitrage play as a bet against Kyren Williams' health. These are the types of stabs we need to take in zero RB builds. Corum has an athletic profile that reminded a lot of people of Kyren, and he's certainly familiar with taking a huge workload for his team. In Corum's final 2 seasons at Michigan, he racked up over 2,700 rushing yards on 506 rushing attempts and finding the end zone 45 times. His experience might get him on the field more often than the likes of Ronnie Rivers, Royce Freeman, and Zach Evans last season, but that's certainly no guarantee after Williams accounted for 57% of the team's RB opportunities in only 12 games played. Where Corum could sneak onto the field even with a healthy teammate may be in the receiving game. Among 60 qualifying running backs last year, Williams ranked 57th in yards per route run and dead last in targets per route run. This could see the rookie carve out a bit of a role, but it might be a stretch to say that will be enough to get him into our starting lineups with any consistency. Regardless, Corum will likely operate as a locked-in RB2, if not an RB1, if his backfield mate misses any amount of time in 2024.
It's a handoff to Ekeler, bounces it outside to the 15, spins away to the 10. 10 to the 5, dragging a defender into the end zone. Touchdown, Chargers.
How good of a game is Austin Ekeler having? He is on fire right now in the zone.
Back in March, the longtime Charger great signed a 2-year, $11.4 million contract with the Washington Commanders. On a per-year basis, it was right in line with the average of what was a pretty loaded free agent class, much less than Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, but far more than Alexander Mattison, Zeke Elliott, and others. Austin Ekeler and fantasy managers were disappointed in the 2023 season. The pass-catching maven dealt with leg issues that clearly sapped the burst that makes him such a defensive annoyance. The year started off well for both parties, as Ekeler kicked off the season with 164 total yards and 4 receptions, spearheaded by a vintage 55-yard scamper en route to 24.4 half PPR points. Little did we know at the time that the overall RB2 Week 1 performance would be the highlight of the entire year, thanks in large part to an ankle injury that he suffered in the process. When he returned in Week 6, his typical high-end burst was very clearly missing as he carried the ball 43 times over the next 3 games, failing to break any single run over 7 yards. The drop to an RB23.5 PPR points per game wouldn't have felt so crushing if Ekeler hadn't performed at such a consistently excellent level for so many years, and certainly would have been much easier to stomach if it hadn't cost us the 104 on draft boards last season. But what is even more likely to stick out in drafters' minds is the fact that he was still kind of performing, with his usual heightened role in the passing game giving him a floor that we would typically be excited about as a flex option. At our current point in the fantasy calendar, Ekeler is coming off draft boards in the 9th or 10th round, depending on what platform you're using. While he was almost assuredly lost his number 1 role, there's still plenty of standalone value here in Washington behind Brian Robinson. The incumbent handled only 46.3% of his team's carries last season, and though his moderate pass game role was a relief to those who drafted him, it still only amounted to 36 receptions. The team isn't likely to finish the season with the top of the league RB target share, with quarterback Jaden Daniels projected to take off with the ball at a high clip, but new offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury did maintain a league average rate when he had Kyler Murray in Arizona. If Austin Ekeler is back to full health by Week 1, rotating in with Robinson could provide him with breathers and offer fantasy players the explosive option we've come to know and love. His days as a top 5 option are behind us. However, he has the opportunity to produce as a consistent RB2 or 3 with spike weeks as an RB1 from time to time. That's exactly what we're looking for in a 0 RB build.